It's Spoilerin time, folks. This is the show where me, Tom Merritt, and my co-host Brian Brushwood from Cordkillers take all that information we've been learning about how to watch things, watch them, and then talk about them. This week, we're going to spoil The Office UK, episode 3 of season 2. Let's see, is there anything else? Oh, right. There was that 20-second Marvel movie, Avengers Endgame. We'll be talking about that. And, some series called Game of Thrones had its third episode of season 8, which apparently was pretty interesting. We're going to talk about that as well. Like I said, I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Yeah, but more importantly, I heard you say the words, it was a 20-second movie. I'm like, it was a bit longer than 20. Oh, the 20-second movie. Got it.
Really? I only saw mine was only 20 seconds long. I think I got ripped off.
Hey, joining us, we have Amos from the Ritual Misery podcast. How you doing, man?
I am doing well, and I'm excited to talk about some Thrones.
Well, hey, man, let's start by checking out the standings in the summer movie draft.
Now, listen, folks, we know you're all excited about how well Ugly Dolls and Longshot are going to do this weekend. But before we get there, let's talk about the $357 million opening weekend of Avengers Endgame for Team Frog Pants.
Is Avengers going to do $1 billion domestic? I guess the first Avengers didn't it?
Did it? Did it do $1 billion?
Here, let me take a look. Here, you chat about whether you think I'm right.
So here's the thing. Here's what has to happen for Team Frog Pants. The only other movie they have is Longshot, which is it's Longshot.
It's a long shot.
They need Avengers Endgame to beat probably Team John Drucker.
Okay.
Team John Drucker already has $413 million in the bank for Captain Marvel. They have Toy Story 4 and It Chapter 2 coming out. So they are likely to hit over $1 billion. So it wouldn't conceivably be enough for Frog Pants to get $1 billion.
Yeah, you're right.
Guarantee a win.
When I was thinking of $1 billion, I was thinking of international. Infinity War did 678. Avengers did 623. I think it's safe to say that Endgame is going to crush Infinity War, but even if it does 150%, you're just barely at $1 billion. And I think this year, whoever wins is going to be over $1 billion.
Yeah. And that is probably going to be Team John Drucker,
which weirdly gives me
theirs to lose.
Well, and again, the inside sauce, John Teasdale of Team John Drucker really is not optimistic. He said that Captain Marvel is so far below their internal projections that he's convinced that I think it's not Frog Pants. I forget who his favorite was.
Would it be Sword and Laser? Team Sword and Laser, perhaps?
Yes, especially after the Aladdin trailer dropped.
Yeah. Well, Team Sword and Laser has $0 right now.
Yeah,
we are the last team in the hunt to have a movie come out, but that will end May 17th when John Wick Chapter 3 comes out. The Lion King had a pretty good looking trailer in front of Avengers Endgame that I heard more than one person come out of saying, I hadn't really been interested in The Lion King, but I saw that before Avengers and now I'm kind of interested.
Anything you want to disclose?
What? No, there's nothing to. These were not people related to me. These were people from the Frog Pants universe that were at the Endgame.
No. I
meant on Thursday.
Namely that it's your movie.
I thought that was pretty obvious.
Okay.
When I said I'm excited about our lineup because Lion King had this. I thought that was implied in the setup.
You swapped into editorial mode. That was just like disclosure. He owns the movie.
No, I was saying I'm excited about our lineup because we have the Lion King. Yeah,
right. Hey man, you just want to dive in? Which one first?
Let's get right into Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Because Amos has to.
Sure. Oh, Game of Thrones. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Hey, I thought it was pretty good. I liked it a lot.
This feels like Brian. Like I have things to say, but I don't want to rain on anybody's parade. And it's not that I didn't like it. Am I close?
Yep. The salt comes at the end. Things I liked. I loved the whole lighting the swords on fire bit. The idea of conveying the epic scale of a battle purely by watching just lights move around on a screen and then wink out. Phenomenal. That whole bit where Arya has the head injury and is hiding from the White Walkers, and from a Foley decision to yes, give the sound of blood dropping, but no, give no sound at all to her body moving around and thereby convey that she has a supernatural gift of being sneaky. All of that was so good. I really dug all that. Not sure that I understand the reason that you keep your dragons hanging around rather than, start to thin just have them kill a bunch of White Walkers out in front. I understand from a storytelling perspective that you want to have a lot of tension, and then you have the big release of all the tension. From a tactics perspective, that didn't quite land with me. I'm in love with the idea of Tyrion and Sansa taking the Iron Throne by the time this is all over. Also, who thought it was a good idea to hide in a crypt for safety, given
I said this last week, and you were like kind of poo-pooing my idea.
Okay, so that was the question that we had during Weird Things. I said, who was it that pointed out that the crypt is a terrible place to hide?
That was me.
That was you. Great. You were 100% right, my friend.
Yes, it's a really, really bad idea.
But no name. By the way, though, the resurrection in the crypt was
inconsequential.
Yeah, it really was in the end. You're right. Yeah.
We didn't even see a headless
some
Ned
people
Stark.
we didn't know got killed. Maybe we were afraid Gilly got killed, and then that was it. And she was fine. She was there at the end. So okay.
But it did add an interesting source of alternate suspense, because you had all these things going on above ground, and even though at the end of it, the people that we know all managed to stay alive, it still gave you something to distract you from all the things going on above ground, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And that's something that they mentioned in the post show of the episode, was that they wanted to tell different stories so that you weren't kind of focused on one thing for too long in this behemoth of an episode.
Yeah, the Arya stuff where they turned it into a horror movie was fun. I didn't get why the first time through. I watched it twice. The second time through, I saw her hit her head.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh, okay, she's stunned and she's out of it and she's kind of reverting from her training until she gets herself together. But I missed that the first time.
You and me both. It wasn't until we were discussing the show earlier today that somebody pointed out that they clearly had demarcated that.
Yeah. And I don't think it's as good of a battle episode as either Battle of the Bastards or Hardhome.
I agree.
But I guess it doesn't need to be, because it is trying, like Amos, like you just said, it's trying to tell you more than just the story of the battle, because the battle, you don't have any tactics from the Night King. The Night King is like, okay, whites, all of you walk that way as fast as possible, and it doesn't matter how many of you get killed. And I thought that was a nice illustration where they light the trench, and then the whites are like, we'll just lay on that till it goes out, and then we'll cross right on in. Like, that is the battle you're fighting. So you don't get these great strategic moments like you did in the Battle of the Bastards. And in Hardhome, I felt like it was more about the terrain and the escape. That was where the strategy came from. With Winterfell, it's like, well, we're just hunkered down and we have to see how long we can survive, which is, I guess, because I get what you're saying about the dragons thing, but I guess that's why you keep your dragons, is you want to lure the Night King in, because that's your only chance of winning is to kill the Night King. But I don't see why you couldn't be out there flaming a few more down, right? I mean, why not?
But again, at this point, Game of Thrones has so much credit in the bank. I mean, it's the best show that's ever been. So, if that's how they want to tell the story, fine, great. I assume there's going to be a reason and it'll pay off later.
What'd you think of the very end?
The very end.
Arya's leap.
That's great. I like the fact, a nice side effect of doing the horror movie segment is that now they have credibility. Like, no, she can be absolutely silent and not be seen even by the supernatural forces that are trying to find her. As a result, it's not out of the question for her to just pop out of nowhere with assassin stuff. I will say I fell for the moment he grabbed it. I was like, oh, so Arya dies, and that 1-2 punch. It was really, look at that, goosebumps as I'm saying it. That's amazing.
Yeah,
and I haven't found backup of this, but Amos, maybe because you've been rewatching him for the podcast. Has she done that move before? I felt like I've seen her do that.
Somebody
move
said
before.
They did. Yeah,
she had trained it in last season.
Okay,
yes. I believe with. I want to say it was with Brienne, the battle with Brienne.
Brienne, yeah.
Okay.
When she first came on with Brienne, she did a similar move to bring the dagger But I could be wrong, but I know she's done it before. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
There was kind of a cool mirror image with Arya going out guns a-blazing, getting hit, getting scared and dazed, and then going back. That was an inverse of the Hound being surrounded by fire and like I can't even, but then seeing Arya in trouble, jumps forward and does, those are nice inverse storylines.
There's also a theory kicking around that we've been hearing on and off about the prince who was promised, right? Azor Ahai, if you know the books. But it's Melisandre has been saying, I'm looking for this king, and that's why she bled Gendry, and that like she was going to figure out who this prince who was promised was, and she kept getting it wrong. And there's a theory that when she locks eyes with Arya in that weird, uncomfortable long stare between them, it's because she finally realized that Arya was the one she has been looking for. Who is of royal blood, I guess. King of the North? I don't know how that works. But whatever, that's why she sticks around. That's why she showed up at Winterfell. And that's why as soon as Arya has done her bit, Melisandre's like, great, I'm out. I've finally found the princess who was promised. I'm going to take off my little crown and become an old person and die.
Yeah.
See, I took Melisandre going out there and just walking away and dying like that was it was almost... This entire show, we've been talking about how story arcs are taking people, and okay, well, so-and-so story arc, like Theon's story arc, he's gone through the introduction, he's gone through the lows, now the highs, and his story is done, so he can die, and it's okay. And Melisandre kind of took that as a literal aspect of it, like, okay, my story is done. I don't need to wait for death. I can go now. I can just die. And it was I don't know how I felt about it, but it seemed fitting.
Yeah, I think it would have been. It was a bit bizarre that at the beginning of this episode she's like, "Hey, it's me, Red Woman. I'm back." So anyway, where are we up to? Like,
yeah, I know y'all were expecting a big bunch of zombies right now, but it's just me.
I meant to show up last episode, but you guys seem real busy with this campfire thing. Which, speaking of which, I don't mind taking, place setting and all that stuff. And we did complain last week about how, one episode, sure, the second episode, especially expecting the battle, not getting it, like taking 2 full episodes was like a giant rubber band being pulled back. And I definitely went in steeled. Like by the end of that second episode, I'm like, oh, so many of these people are going to die. That's the only reason I could think of that they would have 2 episodes, 2 full episodes of nothing happening, is if they want to let us know that we have to enjoy these characters while we still can, which is why, and it's a weird thing to say, there is a bit of backlash on the Twitters and in the general gestalt about like, oh, not nearly as many characters died as I
almost feel like that's the big twist, right? Like, oh, wait a minute. They fooled us again. They lured us into finally thinking everyone was going to die. And, like 5 people died. Theon was probably the biggest name out of the bunch, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the
or
also
Jorah, maybe. I don't know.
They had it open to where anyone could have died in the episode and it would not have been unexpected.
Yeah.
So even with all that buildup and it not paying off the way you thought it was, at any time, any of those characters were at risk of not being in any more scenes. So there was that suspense that was built up, and that aspect of it, the theme, it paid off, even if the expectation was that more people would die than did.
And I was also surprised. I had convinced myself that they would lose this battle, that the story next week would be the remnants racing to the Iron Islands and racing south to King's Landing, trying to plead with Cersei to come out of her keep and assist them. And instead, I think maybe I'm happy they didn't, because part of that would have been like, well, what is Cersei going to say? No. I mean, at that point, if she's all they have left, then she has to come out into the field. This means that the last 3 episodes are going to be the Game of Thrones. They are going to be, can the remnants of Daenerys's army, with the revelation about Jon Snow's heritage bugging her, pull it together and have enough people left to be able to take down Cersei?
In that regard, there are 2 beefs. One is an aesthetic beef, and it's minor. It's a minor quibble. We all understand that Night King is the Nexus, the puppeteer that runs all this stuff. Killing the Night King, man, oh man, did it look just like the end of the Phantom Menace. And man, oh man, did I expect all of the undead to have as much autonomy as all of the battle droids at the end of the Phantom. So the Phantom Menace, they very clearly establish all of the battle droids have at least some amount of autonomy, but then one ship blows up and then they all just crumble down.
Right.
It's fine to convey that same idea, but maybe, waves of decay and confusion, and then it's easy to slaughter them or whatever.
My interpretation of this, and it's just my interpretation, I have no backing from this from any source, was that she stabbed the Night King in the same place that the children of the forest stabbed him when they created him.
And then they closed the loop.
That didn't just kill the Night King, the Nexus, that ended the magic. And that's why they all were gone at once, because the magic that was keeping all of them alive instantly disappeared.
That'd be great. And there's two ways to tackle this for my experience, and I'm only speaking to my experience.
Sure.
Is you could convey a little more of like, no, he was the nexus that held them together, and it degrades and falls apart. Or you could beforehand prime me a little bit more to understand that that happened. But as it happened, it just bore an unfortunate resemblance to the end of Phantom Menace. Separate from that, I had been hoping in the entire story of A Song of Ice and Fire that as much as we're all focused on the winning of the Game of Thrones, that the ending would be, oh, wait, it's dumb to be fighting over a chair when there are real things in the world that need to be fixed. And now that we've killed the Night King, I feel this weird... And again, we don't even know that he's dead. For all we know, maybe he pops back up and haha, gotcha, I am an existential threat after all. But if the rest of the story is going down to King's Landing, that sleepy, seat of power of Westeros, and to take a pouty woman off of a chair, that feels so small to me.
Well, when you put it like that, it sounds real small, but I bet that's not how they put it. I don't think it's like, hey, everybody, let's go down to Sleepy Town and take Sleepy Lady off her chair. I think it's going to be battles in the field. It's going to be the neck. We're going to see the twins again. Like all of the battles that were happening at the beginning of this series are going to happen again, except now with the remnants of whatever Dothraki might be left on the Unsullied and the Starks, plus whatever houses didn't show up for this battle, who are like, we actually have all our people left, going against the Golden Company and whatever King's Landing forces Cersei has. And then Sunspear's fine. They're down there sitting like, hey, we're cool. Whose side should we pick? I imagine they might enter into this again as well.
And I bet next week's episode is going to be all about resetting up that conflict, reminding us that Cersei should not be in power, and that there is an entire army of people who don't believe that who believe that there are three other more proper people to be in power yet.
And you know what? Maybe now's a good time, just as this episode was entirely in the North, like maybe next episode is entirely an episode in King's Landing and her getting the news of, wait, they won? Wait, what? And they have dragons?
She's gonna be pleased. This was her best case scenario is they win and they're not just decimated, they're obliterated, and now I can go easily clean up what's left.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will say that my most disappointing aspect of this episode, and there were several that I didn't particularly like on a minor scale, but the one thing that I really hope, and I've almost lost hope that it'll happen, is I want an explanation of the Night King and Bran's relationship and the whole origin story and all that. Like, I want to know the theology behind it, and it doesn't look like I'm going to get any of that now because that part of it's over, and I agree. Is really disappointing to me.
Yep, that totally landed with me. Like at some point, I was like, "Wait, why are they so confident that the Night King is going to chase down wherever Bran is?" And they're like, "Because magic. That's the only reason they gave."
What exactly was Bran warging into for the last hour and a half?
He was warging into the Ravens to lure the Night King in, and apparently he just stayed in the Ravens the whole time.
Hang on. I was wondering
that too, because having him no longer be warging at the end would be no different than having him still looking like he's warging.
Tom,
right? Like he didn't do it.
What do we know Ravens are used for in this universe?
Messages.
Right, so maybe that's maybe it looked pointless in the battle.
He didn't need to warg into them to send them, though.
Maybe he did. Maybe who knows?
I don't know. That's like saying, what was that wizard doing? Sending email.
I mean, with the right, maybe you could say I could see a plot device where it's like, it's not just that they had to arrive at exactly the right time, so all the forces responded in exactly the right order.
Where I think you've got something is to pull back from that, because you could be totally right, but you can be extra right. I think if you pull back and say, we don't know what he was doing, maybe he was doing something that's really important at that point. Maybe it was with Ravens. Who knows?
The show doesn't have a track record of doing too much pointless stuff, so I'm going to guess that while it felt pointless,
we'll find out what
episode,
he was up to. Maybe you're right. Yeah. At least I hope so. And also, both dragons made it through. Pretty beaten up. One of them looks like it's flying in the previews for next week, though. So it looks like the Rhaegal.
Did they? I got the impression that one of the dragons died. The one that was covered with ants.
I thought so too until I saw the previews, and then I was like, oh, I guess Rhaegal lived. Okay, there he is.
I had to pause the preview for next episode, but both of them are there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I almost called her Winter because she reminds me of my old Austin roommate's dog, who was a Samoyed wolf
Ghost,
hybrid, whose name was Winter. Ghost shows up in the preview as well. So
see all this like in the preview stuff, because I read somebody's take on it, and I was so like, wait, they lived, and I was like, from the show I watched, looked like they got overwhelmed, this person, that person, and then previews. All right.
Well, I mean, it's just a time travel cheat to find out, like, next week, oh, I guess Ghost made it through. Oh, I guess Rhaegal made it through. Okay, I guess we're good. Yeah.
We get to see another dog stand around.
We got to see.
We didn't see any dogs this week.
Yeah. We had a running dog this week.
Wait, did we? I didn't even see it. At all.
No, Ghost runs out with the Dothraki and Jorah, and you're like, wait, why aren't you with Jon? Also, that's a really bad idea. That's why I thought Ghost didn't make it, because nobody made it back from that thing. So
I thought Jorah came back as a white because of the view on his face as he was riding by. His face
I think they were trying to make you worry about that at one point.
Yeah, but then Grey Worm didn't react to it, and I was like, well, that's. What?
Hey, you know what?
Saw something different.
RoboJeff's making a comment about the low visibility people have been complaining about. I wonder if that depends on what kind of gear you have and what kind of internet connection. Because while it was dark, I didn't have a problem seeing anything.
Apparently, there were some cable providers that were doing some compression or some equalization.
Foxtel, there are screenshots of Foxtel really getting rid of some of that low end information on the screen,
and as a result, you're just not seeing anything at all. Yeah. And even with the same source on two different monitors here in the studio, like there was a massive difference between the bigger screen and the smaller screen.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it looked clear, because I could see where if this was over compressed, that it would just turn into a massive blocks and you wouldn't be able to tell what was going on, which would be very disappointing.
Yeah, as it was, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love the suspense. I love the darkness of it, and the cinematography wise, it was beautiful.
I actually enjoyed it more the second time through, to be honest, because I think I was too worried about what might happen to pay attention sometimes the first time through, and the second time through, I caught so many more things. I'm like, oh, she said that. Oh, there, okay. So yeah, I think it held up. I'm looking forward to next week, to be honest.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to let Amos go to prepare for Let's Talk About Thrones, where this conversation in a manner will continue, because I am a guest on this week's episode for that as well. Also, he is promised to watch Avengers Endgame without knowing anything else about it for us, so we can't spoil it for him. Thank you, Amos.
I don't want to spoil my watching of the spoiler of the series.
Yes.
You're not going to spoil your spoilering.
Yes.
If people want to find Let's Talk About Thrones, where should they go?
Just let's talk about thrones.com. It'll
Excellent.
redirect you to right where you need to be, and everything else that you need to find about me is on that site.
Excellent. Thank you, Amos.
Thank you.
Oh boy, Tom.
All right.
Tom,
Brian.
I'm getting loose. I'm getting loose. I'm in the zone.
Get that gauntlet hand loosened up.
That's right.
You ready?
From my full plate armor.
Where do you even want to start with this?
Can we start with just a nod? And I think we talked about it just a little bit in the main show, but pacing on these movies. I remember with watching Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, thinking how terrible the pacing would feel if that movie was just a standalone movie. To spend, over a half hour of sad funerals in your 3-hour block seems insane. But it was perfectly reasonable for the 9-hour epic that they told. Likewise, my only complaints, and it's a minor complaint, in Avengers Infinity War was they snap of the fingers, half the world dies, roll credits, right?
Yeah.
I was so thrilled with how this opened and how much time they give us to just 9/11 the hell out of this. Like, everybody had a 9/11, and there it all is. Then, after we've established that this is an angry, sad world that has been deeply injured, we have a full-on SEAL Team 6 moment where Thor walks in, cuts off the head of Osama bin Laden, and finds it to be a totally Pyrrhic victory that brings no joy, solves nothing, and goes nowhere. And then, my favorite part, 5 years later, that moment of like, no, we're going to live in this world. Nothing will be undone. Even if we make it through this, we're going to have scars for forever. That was so bold and powerful for me. I loved it beyond words.
Yeah, I agree. I was shocked when Thanos' head came off.
Yeah.
I wasn't shocked that he died. I was shocked that we were that far into the movie and they're like, yeah, Thanos dead. So now what? And I love that they jumped 5. I mean, I remember when my first viewing of this, when they jumped to 5 years later, I just went, wow. Yeah. So nothing solved at this point, right? Like, this is going to be hard. And I loved all the little beats of Black Widow making herself a peanut butter sandwich because her way of coping is to overwork. And to just feel like maybe she has some control over something. And Captain Marvel's way of dealing it is to get new haircuts constantly. And I love, because as soon as I saw the haircut, I'm like, that's supposed to be a woman dealing with her stress by changing her look constantly. And then they have Rocket call it out, like, "Well, you're gonna get another haircut." I loved every little take, how Captain America is Captain Americaing it by like, well, I'm going to go help people. I'm going to sit down and listen to their problems. And that was just fabulous. I knew Ant-Man would be the clincher to this. I have to just let go of the fact that it was a mouse walking over the controls that brought him back. But after that, I love the idea that you get to see this from the perspective of somebody who was only gone for 5 hours. I was like, what the hell happened? Where, I guess we lost. Who were we? Where is everyone? Is my daughter alive? What did you think of those bits?
Loved all of that. I also loved the hints that, what we saw was like a mild version of The Stand. In The Stand, 1 in 1,000 people survive. So there's a lot of stuff around. So that alters the economy and all this other stuff. And in this case, 50% of everyone has more. That was the whole point of Infinity War. And yet, what we see is people coming together. We see all those boats around the Statue of Liberty. I thought that was a fine and powerful image. We have half the garbage men, so of course there's going to be garbage piled up in the background and all that stuff.
Well, there's just empty neighborhoods, right? Where it's like, well, there's no reason to live here. I'm the only one who made it. I'm just going to go somewhere else. Goodbye. And houses just dilapidate. That was great.
Yeah, and then and you're right. Our anchor is Ant-Man because we did not experience those 5 years, and so there we are. There's that brief moment. There, of course, was a lot of speculation after Infinity War about like, well, how do you fix this? And it seemed like the dominant theory was, it's something to do with the Soul Stone. So and so's got the Soul Stone memory in her heart, something or other. They're all going to hold hands and think about their loved ones, and then they'll all come back, or who knows, right? None of that. Like, no. Stones are destroyed. Like they orchestrated a moment of genuine despair, and I'm like, I don't know how to fix this. And then when they went to the time travel bit, number one, grinning ear to ear, lit up like a candle the moment I saw Professor Hulk. And I was like, oh my God, because and no explanation, like, I figured this out. This is where I'm at now. And immediately I thought, maybe there'll be a Mr. Fix-It movie down the road, a Gray Hulk saga, all of that stuff. But the idea of introducing time travel, but limiting the rules. So it's like, look, we're just going to steal some stuff from another timeline. We're going to bring it back and rock it. And by the way, I know you're the type of person who I will fetishize the rules of time travel and all that, but
don't say fetishize.
Okay. I am a subscriber to the many worlds hypothesis that says literally every thought, everything you do, there's another universe where something else happened. They just went stealing from other neighborhoods. And I loved that Tilda Swinton moment of like, well, that's great for you, but what happens on our timeline? And it seems like they cleaned up enough to make it work.
No. Okay, first of all, I always knew it was Ant-Man. I didn't buy any of the Soulstone crap. I'm like, Ant-Man, they dropped a huge hint in the extra credit scene for Ant-Man and the Wasp where they're like, now remember, in the quantum realm, time is different and you can get caught in a time tunnel. And so I'm like, well, obviously Ant-Man is the way out. I don't know how it's going to happen. I did not have this in mind. I was okay with many worlds. I'm okay with changes in the timeline. It's not my favorite. But for this movie, I would have looked clean away if they hadn't given me 2 lectures to tell you Professor Hulk instructs us all that time travel doesn't work like that. You can't just go back in the past and change the future. And then when he's talking to Tilda Swinton, she says that creates these alternate realities, which are really bad. And Hulk says, don't worry, we won't do that. And then they violated it multiple times, many of which could be fixed, right? You can look at Loki did in the Tesseract and saying, well, won't that change the future? Maybe. Or maybe there's a story to be told yet. Maybe it's in the Loki Disney Plus series where they go and they get Loki and they put him back and the Tesseract is put back in the timeline and everything's fine. All of those can be fixed, but there's 2 particularly, 3, maybe 2.5 that can't be fixed. One is you've killed Thanos at the end of this movie before Thanos did all the things that you're killing him for. You can't take Thanos back and put him in the timeline and fix the timeline now because he's dead. You had Nebula kill herself before she became the person who is killing Nebula. So now you've created a paradox because Nebula, who killed Nebula, can't exist to kill Nebula if Nebula, who killed Nebula, killed Nebula. And the half one is Gamora, who maybe she went back to the timeline, but we never see what happens to her. And there's a tease that Quill is out there searching for her, which obviously would be the plot of a future Guardians movie, probably. But if she doesn't go back, then she's not in Guardians of the Galaxy 1 or 2 or any of the others.
Yeah.
So and here's the thing, if you hadn't made a point of looking me in the eye, Russo brothers, and telling me, no, Tom, the rules you like for time travels are absolutely the ones we're following in this movie, I wouldn't be so confounded by it. I'm not saying I dislike it. I'm just curious how or if they're going to fix that.
I don't think they need to. So in the
they absolutely need to.
In the many worlds hypothesis,
but they told us the many worlds they told us the many worlds isn't the way it works. And if it is Tilda Swinton, it's really bad and we'll stop it.
No. She referred to her timeline as separate real estate from the timeline he's from. They're neighbors. And so she's saying, you want to take our stones, setting us on a different course, and that's going to work out great for you in your other reality timeline. And keep in mind, the Marvel Universe is very much about the many worlds hypothesis. That's what the whole What If series is about. So when they're saying don't talk to your whatevers, don't mess things up or whatever, that's, to me, reads as more as don't trash our neighbors' houses. We're just going to steal their stones, use them, and then put them back.
That's not what Banner was saying. And I don't think that's what Tilda Swinton was saying. She was saying, you'll create an alternate timeline that you'll be on, but what happened? What about ours? Because now we fork off into this other one, and that's bad. And Banner said, don't worry, we won't do that. And he collapses it back and says, we'll just keep it as one timeline.
No, that's not at all. Oh my God, Tom, how many times have you seen the movie? That's not what he said at all. He said, yeah, if we stole the stones and you don't have them, then that's a bad timeline.
But he says we're going to
come back and put them back, so you're going to be on the same timeline.
Make sure it's just one timeline.
No, it's not one
because
timeline.
alternates are bad.
No, it's not one timeline. It's your timeline won't go in a bad way. They're
he's saying
neighbors.
your timeline and our timeline will remain the same.
No,
they
he
won't
did
split
not
into
say
two.
that. He absolutely did not say that. I don't know where you got that idea. That is 100% not what he said.
No,
he
that
said,
is 100% what he said. We're going to have to leave it there because I 100% disagree with you. That is exactly what he said.
Okay, I was left from that scene with a clear understanding that it was understood that this was a many worlds hypothesis and that he would be a courteous neighbor and make sure to return the borrowed goods exactly where they came from.
Nope, that's not what I got at all.
Cordkillers@gmail.com.
We don't even have to. I mean, email us if you want, but we're already getting people saying Brian is right, Tom is right in the chat room, and I think I know what's going on. I think both interpretations are correct.
Oh, go on.
I think it's a many worlds hypothesis, and this is where I've been trying to go.
What the hell is going on? No, please go, Tom. But
go on.
Okay. Yeah.
What?
I would love to hear the conclusion of this hypothesis.
From Bryce's perspective, he watched an argument in which Brian was shouting many worlds, Tom was saying one world, and then you said, I think I've solved it. It's many worlds.
That's not exactly what Brian's saying.
Sure, please.
It's that both of us are correct, which is a many world. That's why I said that's a many worlds hypothesis.
Sure.
Because there is Bruce Banner is saying, and I still think you're wrong on this. Bruce Banner is saying there is one timeline, and you're worried, Tilda Swinton, that we'll spark it in two, and then yours and ours will be different, and yours will suck. But I'm going to bring the stone back and make it one timeline. But he's wrong. I think that's what it is that he's actually wrong about that, and that he didn't fix it. He didn't bring it back and fix the timeline, and there will be
okay.
timelines.
All right, now we're having a different discussion now. If your thesis is that there are many timelines that now suck because of the hijinks that we just saw, I agree, but not the one we're on.
Banner was saying that's not how it works. You can't go back and fix things. Tilda was the first one who brought up alternate realities, and he very clearly said, no, we'll put the stone back. And he took the black line and collapsed it back into the one line and said, there will be one line. No one said anything about many worlds.
Sure.
No one said anything about neighbors, because that's all you bringing in pre-existing knowledge into it. What he said was, we have this one timeline. I'll make sure it stays one timeline.
Well, and I think,
but I think he's wrong. I think you're bringing in your pre-existing knowledge is good because you're like, no, Bruce, but I know it doesn't work like that. Tilda's right. And even when you bring it back, you really will be bringing it back into a neighbor's timeline.
And I think it's such a casual talk almost when Banner and the Ancient One are talking, because her whole goal is like, hey, we need the time stone because we use it to protect the world and the universe. And if we don't have one, then yes, we're going to be subject to all this cosmic horror, which is probably what's going to happen in the next phase of the MCU, because there are still no stones left. But at least the stone gets put back at some point. And so it's not exactly taking it out for even a second would change history on some level.
But he doesn't take it out for a second. The way time travel works, he brings it right back and it's never been gone.
Okay. Well, okay. And
if you were Tilda Swinton on that roof, you hand it to him and say, good luck. And the next second, Captain America shows up and goes, here it is. It's back.
Yeah. I mean, that, and so I still think there's even if it's the exact second, right? That still could change it. I think it's ultimately the same result, though, in that time gets its stone back so that it can continue to save the planet until Doctor Strange has to give up the stone. If that makes sense.
I'm just curious how they resolve this, because I'm fairly certain that the Russo brothers don't go to such lengths to have Banner explain it twice and then seemingly violate what he said later, only to just leave it like, but don't worry.
Do you think that Tony's snap solves the other inconsistencies between Gamora and Nebula and Thanos?
I think because what we have...
it makes it worse if it's one timeline.
Well, because if he's sending Thanos back to his time and it just looks like they all got dusted, then at least he's back in his timeline to continue doing the things that would lead him up to stealing all the stones and then using and destroying them.
I was saying that, like, I would have liked it better if his snap actually sent them back to their timeline and used the Mind Stone to wipe out their memory, so they just continued on with all the events that we've seen them do. Because snapping and dusting them means none of them can go back to their timeline and continue the events that led them to that point.
But just because yes, they've visually dusted, but who's to say that that's not what happens with the dust?
Happen underneath? Yeah, maybe.
I think having another snap at the very end of a movie where they can just say new rules.
I mean, dramatically, it worked great.
Yeah.
So if I was going to speculate, I think that Gamora in Guardians 3 will be not our Gamora, but the Gamora who needs to learn to love Quill.
Yeah, of course. That's the Gamora we've just been introduced to, for sure.
Right. I think that the Loki series on Disney Plus is about his adventures now that he's got a Tesseract and what happens there. I think that in quote unquote our timeline, there are two Tesseract stones, just one running around with Loki, one I don't know.
I don't think there have to be two. It's just one has Loki running around, and the end of that adventure is someone bringing him back to that instant with some Pym particles.
That would be problematic because, like they went and stole. Well, I guess it does go back. Oh, you're right.
Because they took it from
from the past, and then they put it back in the past. So that's fine as well.
Yeah.
Hey, can we talk about the movie instead? Anyone want to talk about the movie? How cool is it when Captain America picked up the hammer of Thor?
So
that was
good.
fun.
Best moment.
That was great.
I knew it.
Anybody else love Thor Lebowski?
I love
that. Was great.
I didn't catch my first viewing. I didn't catch Iron Man actually saying like.
I was deeply bummed by him calling that out.
What?
They put a hat on a hat.
Designed for you.
Like I already got it. Like I was like, oh my god, they're doing The Big Lebowski. That's great. And then he was like, by the way, we're doing The Big Lebowski. I'm like, God, I already got it. You didn't need to do that.
Oh. That was great, and I liked that they didn't magic him thin at some point. They didn't montage him back, and I know that there's a lot of talk about him being CG and a bodysuit and all, but I do appreciate at least the little step of having him look like that through the whole movie.
Yeah, let him it conveyed a brokenness to him that it's like it was so important that he be out of shape and just broken because it conveyed that nothing was fixed with Thanos,
right.
and that if he did just magic himself into being better, then it's like, no, that's not how being psychologically broken works. You don't get to cast a spell and suddenly you outwardly are projecting confidence and greatness, and instead he breaks the rules that Banner laid out twice, not because they were setting up a bunch of time travel rules, but because they were setting up. Because it was important that it be transgressive, that he can't help himself in this state of brokenness from a narrative standpoint, and he needs to talk to his mom. That's why they had him say it twice.
Even though it broke the rule Banner gave him, I don't think it broke that. I don't think that broke the time stream, because she's like, "Oh, you're from the future. Don't forget, I'm a witch, so I kind of see things a little differently. But don't worry, it's going to be fine. Yeah, I know I'm about to die, but you can't stop that."
Well, so, and from her perspective, he's from a possible future, so that's part of why.
I'm just going to be quiet.
That's the way the many worlds theory. It solves everything. Many worlds.
Go back.
Okay, but again,
and I think that was.
Listen, I know I should have read 40 years of comics to prepare for this movie.
No,
I shouldn't have expected the movie to tell me what was really happening.
There's nothing. This is nothing. It's look. Perceptions of time travel have changed over the years.
He's reaching.
No, he's grabbing from a book. There you go.
Pilot X. Pilot X.
But at any rate, it was great. I cried constantly. The send-offs that we got for both Tony and Steve were perfect. They were perfect, and they both set up many opportunities to see him again. Do you realize that like 10 years from now, there will finally be a good, I'm making this up, imagine a good Fantastic Four movie set in 1967, and we get to have a cameo from a 63-year-old Steve Rogers who's in the middle of living his quiet life because he decided to stay when he went back in time.
Wait, if the Fantastic Four's in the 60s, wouldn't he be like in his...
Because he went,
40s?
he went. What age theoretically is he here now?
Because I think he's like in his 80s in 2019.
Okay,
right?
well,
But
great.
whatever, right? Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but
No, we
my,
get
my
to see
point
all
is, like
Yeah.
an age appropriate Steve Rogers cameo can happen, right? And then likewise, we can have crazy future cyber avatar Jarvis 2.0 with Tony that lives inside Peter Parker's suit or shows up as a hologram. So he's all CG'd. And so he's age appropriate, constantly flash frozen in that perfect representation of Tony Stark. It's great. It's perfect. They solve so many really challenging problems that allow things to go forward and yet give us such a powerful sense of completion.
No, it was an incredible juggling act of giving us legitimate emotional endings, both good and bad, for multiple characters across multiple storylines, and having Tony Stark, where this all began in 2008, end it by saying, "I am Iron Man." I was kind of getting flustered. Just
I know, right?
Again, yeah.
It's great. And that's part of why I didn't want to say it while Amos was on with us. But like, man, I wonder what it's like to start with Endgame and go backwards, and then realize that all of the MCU began with a dude with shrapnel in his heart, hooked up to a car battery in Afghanistan, in this very small, very believable vignette, and yet to end it with alternate timelines, wizards, space guardians, and titans, and it's amazing. It's astonishing.
One thing that people in the chat room keep asking over and over again, so I think we should touch on it, is Black Widow. That scene worked for me. I think Hawkeye and her both had motivations for being the one to sacrifice themselves, and they didn't want the other one to be sacrificed. But they both knew someone was going to have to go. I also, while I was watching it, was like, but wait, if you jump off yourself, then does that count? Because you haven't given up something you love. You had it taken away. And the way they resolved it, where she's holding on to him and she's like, just let go. It's okay. Like, he really did have to he feels like he had to give her up, because part of him is saying, could I have done something else to save her? Right. And so that worked, and that's satisfied. And that's why he ends up with the Soul Stone. But I think what people in the chat room are wondering is like, but wait a minute, I thought we were getting a Black Widow movie. Is she really permanently gone?
Well, I think they've said that those will be, maybe they haven't said, but I think it's very easy to find some time where Black Widow goes and does missions.
I mean, that's one of the nice things that Captain Marvel has done, is establish that this takes place between the Thing and the Thing.
Yeah, and we can do that, and I assume that that's what Black Widow will be. And they've constantly made references to Budapest, which I know is covered in the comics and is kind of adult, but maybe there'll be some version of that in the movie. Who knows?
Mm-mm.
Doggone it, there's something else.
Time heist.
What did you think of the funeral scene where we got to see even the boy from Iron Man 3, but not every single character, because hey, Coulson's not around anymore. He wouldn't be there.
Yeah, it felt right. It was great. I mean, it was also a putting a button on our own personal 11-year journey on all this.
Mm-hmm.
I think the moment where he tells Tony's daughter that he will buy her all the cheeseburgers she wants, and she responds the way a real kid at a funeral does, with like, really, all the hamburgers I want?
Yeah,
it's like an inappropriate time to give me that, but that sounds pretty awesome.
I am certain
Happy just is wanting to make her feel better.
I'm certain, again, because he's talented, I'm sure Favreau, none of that was scripted. I think he just held, because you see that a lot in Chef. He does that. All of the interactions feel super real because they're just having a real conversation with certain story beats. But that did, in particular, really pop out.
Oh, and 8-Bit XD reminds us that's what Tony told Hogan in Iron Man.
What?
He wants a cheeseburger.
Nice.
Very
well, after coming back from the cave.
Doggone it. There was one other thing I really wanted to touch on, but I can't remember it. I can't access it under fire.
Yeah.
Tom.
So
I did.
Okay.
I did. One moment, Tom. There's I don't know if it happened at your theater, but there was this weird ass computer glitch that caused a giant pop-up advertisement in the middle of my Avengers Endgame.
This is a
that
metaphor.
just said, women are great, aren't they? Has nothing to do with this movie you're watching, but women are great. It was artless and crass, and after a whole movie where we already saw nothing but women being awesome and in power, it felt utterly tactless and gross. I held my wife's hand. I resent this moment because I held my wife's hand the entire movie long. And in that moment where it was just gross of like, "Yeah, women are great," Bonnie let go of my hand and crossed her arms and folded in. And I felt this radiating, it was unnecessary, crass, artless, and it was beneath Disney, and I don't know who let that moment in.
I have 3 things to say, one of which I've already said to Brian. My immediate reaction upon seeing that for the first time in the theater was, wow, Brian's really not going to like this scene. Like, I knew immediately. I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is not going to go down well with him. Second thing is I asked Eileen later, hey, what did you think of that scene? And she said, it was fine. I would have preferred if they would have just showed them doing something instead of kind of having that moment and then they all kind of fail at what they do next. Like, there are plenty of ways to show that women are supporting themselves, and they did it another way. So I'm not sure they needed it. She didn't hate it the way you're saying Bonnie hated it, but she definitely could see where you're coming from of like, yeah, there are better ways to do that. Third thing is, and this is a little bit of a departure from that particular point, I was fascinated by the different reactions I got in the 2 screenings. Captain Marvel in particular. In the first screening I saw, when she shows up to save Tony and when she turns into a human bullet and cuts through Thanos' ship, got big cheers and whoops in my first screening. In my second screening, silence.
Yeah. We got cheers and whoops when she said, oh, is it 15 minutes into the movie? I'll be back way far from now in the movie. Don't expect to see me for a while.
I think that scene represents some of the trouble of how they killed the cast off, right? Like, with after the snap, who are the women left? Black Widow, who dies a permanent death.
Oh, that's interesting.
And
Okay, if
Pepper Potts, who we only see digitally put into an Iron Man suit and then doesn't do anything in the suit, really.
If it's a reminder that it's like, hey,
Valkyrie,
we've lost Black Widow, then why not say that? Like, I wish Black Widow was here. Hey, we're here.
I think your reaction is probably stronger than most, but I don't think it's invalid. I think there is something to that really did make it stand out as, oh, you're doing that. It's not a natural move in the flow of this movie. It
broke the spell. Like, Bonnie and I were there holding hands, completely lost in this ecstasy of perfection, and it broke the spell. And to what end? For what message? It didn't. I didn't care for it.
But that said, you cared for lots of other things, and there are lots of other good things in Avengers Endgame. I've mentioned my problem, which is time travel. Brian has mentioned his. Anything else that we want to talk about before we move on?
I know you guys have both seen the movie multiple times now, and so by the second plus viewing, you did not misread this. I only saw it once, and I definitely misread that grief counseling scene at the beginning where the Russo cameo comes in and he's being the gay guy on the in the film. Congrats, it's the director, a straight guy, is being the gay guy in the show.
Which I did not know. I did not.
Right. And I thought that was Bruce Banner because
it looks very close to him.
It looks a lot. At least I kind of thought it looked like Mark Ruffalo, and that made me really enjoy the Hulk in this film. And it was after the film seeing that wasn't even who that was supposed to be was very frustrating, because otherwise that's a throwaway character being probably poorly written, I think.
Oh, I don't know. I rather dug the sincerity of it and the non-issue of it. Like it wasn't. I love like. Oh, I guess that's not Mark Ruffalo. That's not Banner. Because it seems like they would make a thing out of, Banner announcing he was gay. But instead, this is just a world where, we've all moved on, where that's not even an issue, and
yeah. I mean, I think the problem is that's a world where we've moved on and it's not even an issue, but this world hasn't quite got caught up with that world yet.
Right. But you're right. I remember thinking, who would cast if that's not Banner? Why would you cast somebody that looks so close to Banner for whatever?
Because you wanted to have it be a Joe Russo cameo,
right? And I didn't know that was a cameo even.
I don't think that it was a well written bit, even for a throwaway character, and I liked it when I thought it was something else, and because it was even more throwaway than that, it was frustrating after the fact. So
yeah,
I thought all the straight white Catholic guys were written well.
I did enjoy the cameo from Stanley.
That was nice.
It shouldn't work that it was wedged in as crassly as the other thing, where he looks directly at the camera and says something. And
isn't it reused too? I feel like I saw it before.
Is it?
No, I don't think so. They got some kind of like de-aged. It was. I don't know where else they.
I could have sworn I've seen him driving by a military base yelling, "Make love, not war, man." It could be just deja vu. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we did see it twice. But what a fun. I mean, that unearned random pop-up, they had definitely laid 21 movies of groundwork leading up to. So I was a little bit cooler with that.
All right. Well, then, we're going to limit what we say about The Office this week, just because we've spent so much time talking about these Titanic episodes and movies that we've been talking about. But shall we move on?
Yeah. One last thing, prediction about Spider-Man. The second time I watched it, I noticed if it's been 5 years, why are they all in college, high school still?
I noticed that too. I'm like, are we going to find out that the entire high school was dusted, and so they're all back,
just all of his friends? I guarantee you, in the next movie, it'll be a moment where they're like, oh man, it's so weird. Like, we're 5 years behind the rest of the high school. So-and-so's working at Subway now. So-and-so's.
I actually thought it would be pretty cool if Zendaya was not dusted and she's 5 years older than Peter Parker to complicate their relationship.
That might be super fun. But I'm certain that there'll be kind of I think the unpacking of what it's like to be 5 years out of time with everyone else. Also, Tom, if we want to talk about world-breaking problems, let's not worry about time travel. Let's worry about what do you do when the entire population doubles in 1 second? What a disaster the world would become instantly.
Oh, well, I imagine we'll see that in Spider-Man Far From Home as well.
Could be. Hope so.
Yeah. All right. It's Trudy's birthday on The Office, and there's a dildo, and it's being passed around. And that's the episode.
Did I not watch the right episode? Because you're describing not the episode I watched.
What did you watch?
I watched the episode where it started off with him trying to undo the damage by talking about how Denzel and Sidney Poitier are his favorite actors.
Tom, you told me 203, but last week we did 201.
Yeah, we're on the second episode of season 2.
Oh, I also watched that one where he's talking about Sidney Poitier. What's the rest of that episode?
What the rest of that episode is Tim makes his move on cute new chick. Things come to a head where and
David takes him out to the pub
and is just a total dud and doesn't land.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that one yet.
No.
Hey, guess what? Next week there's a dildo. I watched both of these somehow. So I'm ahead. Hey, so let's talk about appraisals. Episode 2, where David Brent tries to win over the people being merged into his office.
It's great. I am enjoying the themes that they're exploring of there's so many delightful ways for David Brent to be inappropriate, and I feel like by the time we're done, we'll get all of them. But for right now, we're seeing him being trying to correct for his previous racial insensitivities by inadvertently being more racially insensitive. And then they announce the drill, and they leave the woman on the wheelchair halfway down the stairs, and then they just decide to peace out. A whole bunch of transgressive stuff on that. I guess we're kind of seeing the new arc of Dawn becoming jealous of Tim's
Rachel
burgeoning relationship. Yeah.
And the sort of like David Brent having to deal with the fact that he's got a new boss. Is that Neil? I think that's Neil.
Yeah, correct. And we're also this is one of the first episodes where I really think we've seen Gareth kind of become the caricature. He's closest to Dwight that we've seen so far, with announcing that he's awesome at everything and that he would never make that mistake for this reason or that reason. Or yeah.
I have to say though, I was glad to see Courage Ale get a little call out. I'm a fan. It's good ale. So there you go.
What's funny is I had to pick that up from context clues that it was a real thing and they were making a moment of talking about a brand, because
Slough's got a brewery and whatever, I can't remember where they came from anymore. Swindon, is that it? Swindon doesn't. I think that was
correct.
The implication. Yeah. Little pint of courage.
I did notice there was one really interesting thing where there's a brief moment where Gareth is talking to Rachel about whether he can go on a date, and she's like, no, I'm going on a date with Tim. But then he's like, oh, well, are you guys going to get it on? And she's like, that's private. And she goes, well, if you do, I don't normally do sloppy seconds, but I mean, make sure you use, and it gets super awkward and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But they clearly had two different takes. And I guess they liked the first half of one and the second half of another, because you watch about 90 seconds of the take, and then somebody walks across the screen. Suddenly, the focus is different. The color temperature is different. Even the placement of the handheld camera is clearly, pulled back, and they just continue the scene. It's pretty wild. It's worth taking a look. It's around the 20-minute mark of this episode.
Well, that's all I have on The Office now, because I can't keep straight which one has a dildo and which doesn't. So, anything else from your end?
It's great. It continues to get increasingly good on its own accord and becoming different.
I have a lot to say about next week's episode. Let me just tell you that. I did watch this one though, but that's we've talked a lot about Game of Thrones and Endgame, so we will be back next week with more Game of Thrones. Barry, because Brian is almost caught up with me.
Yeah, we'll be caught up by next week.
He almost lapped me. And more of The Office UK. We'll talk to you then.
Hopes you have enjoyed this program.